It took many days and many long nights of negotiating to get this right. But today, this council provided a glimmer of hope amongst a sea of unimaginable suffering. We know so much more needs to be done to address this humanitarian crisis and to lay the groundwork for a lasting peace. And let's be clear, Hamas has no interest in a lasting peace. Hamas is determined to repeat the horrors of October 7th over and over and over again. And that is why the United States supports Israel's right to protect its people from acts of terror. And I'll note that the resolution does not support any steps that would leave Hamas in power, which in turn would undermine the prospects for a two-state solution. We're deeply disappointed, appalled actually, that once again, the Council was not able to condemn Hamas's horrific terrorist attack on October 7th. And I can't understand why some Council members are standing in the way and why they refuse to condemn these evils unequivocally.
Today, we supported this resolution, which will streamline aid checks so we can massively scale up the humanitarian response. It demands the immediate and unconditional release of hostages, and it calls for steps towards a sustainable cessation of hostilities.
Представляя ранее нашу поправку, я сказал, что голосование по ней станет моментом истины. Так и произошло. Соединенные Штаты в очередной раз саморазоблачились, на глазах всего мира заблокировав даже крайне ослабленный призыв Совета к прекращению боевых действий в Газе. Вместо этого Вашингтон, идя крайне нечистоплотную игру, продавил в текст фактически лицензию Израиля на убийство мирных палестинцев в Газе под предлогом, цитирую, создания условий для прекращения боевых действий.
We believe that the resolution begins to unblock life-saving aid whose denial has condemned more than 500,000 people in Gaza to famine.
This resolution is a step in the right direction. It must be implemented and must be accompanied by massive pressure for an immediate ceasefire. I repeat, immediate ceasefire. No one should forget that what we are talking about are 2.3 million Palestinians who have been fighting for their life and facing death every single day. This is Israel's goal, its true objective. No future for Palestinians in Palestine. That is why it is bombing everyone and everything. That is why it targets homes, hospitals, schools, bakeries, agricultural fields, water and sanitation networks, so that sustenance of life becomes impossible, and it has become impossible.
Mr. President, 77 days ago, Hamas intentionally murdered, raped, and mutilated 1,300 Israelis and took 250 hostages, and this Council still has yet to issue a single statement condemning Hamas and their atrocities. Israel is already facilitating hundreds of truckloads of aid into Gaza every day. Israel is also willing and able to exponentially increase the entry of aid trucks into Gaza. The only roadblock for aid entry is the UN's ability to accept them. Enhancing UN monitoring or coordination of aid is not a cure-all, and any enhancement of UN aid monitoring cannot be done at the expense of Israel's security inspections. Israel not only has a right but an obligation to guarantee its security. This is why our mission to eliminate Hamas's capabilities has not changed, and this is why security inspections of aid will not change. Israel will not permit the regrouping and rearming of Hamas, as the atrocities of October 7th can never be allowed to repeat themselves. Mr. President, Hamas is a genocidal terror organization. Hamas is a direct threat to the security of Israel, to Gazans, and regional stability. In order to promote security, this Council should first recognize Hamas's terror regime and then focus on the elimination of its threats. It should be focused on freeing the hostages. It should be focused on preventing Hamas from exploiting aid. It should be focused on ensuring Hamas can no longer expand their terror infrastructure.
Now I'll note that the resolution is not perfect. We were appalled that some council members still refuse to condemn Hamas's horrific terrorist attack on October 7th, which set so much heartbreak and suffering in motion. We will continue to push the council to right this wrong. Diplomacy has worked. It was an intense few days of nearly 24-hour-a-day work, lots of phone calls, lots of text messages. My fingertips are tender from texting over the course of these few days. And as I always say, diplomacy is hard, but when you get the results are worth every minute of the hard work.
I think, again, putting people on the ground first and foremost in mind, it would be really easy just to go for rhetorical declarations and end without consensus where we adopt something. And that doesn't help people on the ground. So I feel that what we have done will have impact, will save lives on the ground. And again, as I said in the Council, I have to thank the United States for their close collaboration, Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield for her close collaboration in trying to achieve that outcome. We had the goal of saving lives on the ground in mind. Of course, it was not a perfect resolution. Of course, everyone in this group has called for a permanent ceasefire, and we support what we put forward in the General Assembly that had 153 votes in favor for that ceasefire. And the UAE did submit that resolution less than 10 days ago, and it was not adopted. So we can go for declarations in the Council, or we can try and have impact on the ground for people who need it the most. The veto gets people nothing. The veto is simply a political declaration, but its failure to adopt means that it doesn't have impact for lives on the ground. What we did today establishes a number of principles and a robust architecture to respond to the humanitarian crisis that I've just outlined. And I think, bearing in mind that the suffering is immense, that it will get worse if aid and medicine and food and water does not go in, I think we did the right thing. Of course, history is full of 2020 in hindsight moments, but I think we did the right thing today with the tools that we had and with the global dynamics that we have in this international community. We used it to the best of our ability to help save lives.
We, the Arab group and the OIC, declared that we are working for 3 humanitarian objectives. 1, to stop this war against our people in the Gaza Strip, which means ceasefire, ceasefire, ceasefire now. And then 2 is to have humanitarian assistance up to scale. And in fact, operative paragraph 4, which our brothers in Egypt were pushing so hard for it, we trust that the UN to be responsible for the verification of thousands of truckloads in order to enter the Gaza Strip at scale that asked for by the SG, so that it caters to the needs of the Palestinian people in all parts of the Gaza Strip. And the third part is related to stopping the forced transfer outside of the Gaza Strip.
The real problem is that the way Israel is conducting this offensive is creating massive obstacles to the distribution of humanitarian aid inside Gaza. An effective aid operation in Gaza requires security, staff who can work in safety, logistical capacity, and the resumption of commercial activity. These 4 elements do not exist. Israel began its military operation in response to the horrific terror attacks launched by Hamas on 7 October. And nothing can possibly justify those attacks or the brutal abduction of some 250 hostages. And I repeat my call for all remaining hostages to be released immediately and unconditionally. And nothing can justify the continued fire of rockets from Gaza at civilian targets in Israel, or the use of civilians as human shields. But at the same time, these violations of international humanitarian law can never justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people, and they do not free Israel from its own obligations under international law. We waited 71 days for Israel finally to allow aid to enter Gaza via the Kerem Shalom crossing. And the crossing was then hit while aid trucks were in the area. Second, the humanitarian operation requires staff who can live and work in safety. 136 of our colleagues in Gaza have been killed in 75 days, something we have never seen in the history of the United Nations. Nowhere is safe in Gaza. Shelves are empty, wallets are empty, stomachs are empty. Just one bakery is operating in the whole of Gaza, and I urge the Israeli authorities to lift restrictions on commercial activity immediately. We are ready to scale up our cash grant support to vulnerable families, the most effective form of humanitarian aid. But in Gaza, there is very little to buy. So, ladies and gentlemen of the media, in the circumstances I've just described, a humanitarian ceasefire is the only way to begin to meet the desperate needs of people in Gaza and end their ongoing nightmare. I hope that today's Security Council resolution may help that finally to happen. But much more is needed immediately.
This resolution calls for an increase to aid, but it does not join your call for a ceasefire. When you invoked Article 99, were you hoping for more urgency on the part of the Security Council and perhaps even for them to join your call for a ceasefire?
Of course, I was hopeful. That doesn't mean that things happen according to our hopes. But in any case, today, you can see always a glass as half full or half empty. I hope that today's resolution will make people understand that a humanitarian ceasefire is indeed something that is needed if we want humanitarian aid to be effectively delivered.
Danish Section of Task News Agency, turning back from...
As the conflict intensifies and the horror grows, we will continue to do our part. We will not give up. But at the same time, it is imperative that the international community speak with one voice for peace, for the protection of civilians, for an end to suffering, and for a commitment to the two-state solution backed with action. Thank you.